You may write me down in history with your bitter, twisted lies. You may trod me in the very dirt, but still like dust, I'll rise. Does my sassiness upset you? Why are you beset with gloom? Just 'cause I walk as if I have oil wells pumping in my living room. Just like suns and like moons, with the certainty of times, just like hope springing high, still I rise. Did you want to see me broken? Bowed head and lowered eye, shoulders falling down like teardrops, weakened by my soulful cries. Does my sassiness upset you? Don't take it so hard just 'cause I laugh, as if I have gold mines digging in my own backyard. You can shoot me with your words, you can cut me with your lies, you can kill me with your hatefulness, but just like life, I'll rise. Does my sexiness offend you? Oh. Does it come as a surprise that I dance as if I have diamonds at the meeting of my thighs?
Not as a prophet, but as a humble servant of you.
Out of the huts of history's shame I rise. Up from a past rooted in pain I rise. A black ocean leaping and wide, welling and swelling, I bear in the tide. Leaving behind nights of terror and fear, I rise. Into a daybreak miraculously clear, I rise. Bringing the gifts that my ancestors gave. I am the hope and the dream of the slave.
What immediate results do you hope to achieve?
And so,
We hope to achieve
naturally,
equal rights for any human being in the world.
I'll rise. I'll rise. I'll rise.
Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Stephen Chambers.
Good afternoon. Welcome to Oxford. Welcome to the Skoll World Forum. And welcome if it's your first time, and welcome back if it isn't. And welcome experts, and welcome snowflakes. I am very pleased to see you. Quite a lot has changed since we were last here, hasn't it? Shall we see if we can get through the whole week without mentioning Voldemort? Shall we see if we can turn anger into energy, anxiety into creativity, resistance into a movement, a wall into a bridge? Our theme this year is fault lines, creating common ground. We live on fault lines, many of us literally. New Zealand, Switzerland, Pakistan, California, Chile, Tibet, all sit on fault lines. And I've been reading the names of these rifts in the earth. If you read them slowly, they're a kind of found poetry. New Zealand's South Island sits on Hope Fault. The Pennines here in the UK sit on the the Craven fault system. Oregon sits on the Brothers fault zone. There is a Glarus thrust and an Imperial fault zone. And we could name some less geological fault lines and find some apocalyptic poetry there too. The inequality gap, the liberal disruption, the truth shear, the Brexit trench, and so on. And it's true that we live in geological times. Many, many of us always have. And for some of us, it's a new feeling. We're living in what feels like tectonic crisis. Large continental plates are bumping and overlapping and making us scared. And we feel vertiginous, nauseous even, staring into the abyss. I have some good news. The abyss is not staring back. Resistance brings us together, it consolidates our energies. You make a difference. This week will revive and re-energize us. Our common ground, our shared humanity, the vast resources of creativity, activism, ingenuity, altruism, science, and love will heal the rifts and bridge the gaps. You, here in Oxford this week, are seismic resistors. You're the flex in the steel, and you're the reason I love this week so much. So what of the work at our forum? I predict there will be talk of reconciliation, and we will be more self-conscious about agreeing with each other. We'll talk more about inequality and more about populism. We'll talk about justice, and we'll talk about automation. And we'll be more angry, and we will learn from each other and from those we work with by listening more and listening better. And we'll question received wisdom and remake what we can't salvage. And we will look after each other well, and we will look after ourselves less well, but just enough. And there'll be serious sessions and serious laughter. And there'll be honesty and disclosure. And there'll be films and music and food. And saying that, I feel better already. And now, I'm going to walk and talk. It's my very great pleasure to introduce two amazing people. At the end of 2016, our next speaker wrote about seismic global shifts and societies being stronger together. I can think of no better person to talk about fault lines and creating common ground. Winnie Byanyima is the executive director of Oxfam International. An aeronautical engineer, an activist, a human rights advocate, a former MP, a former ambassador, and a very welcome guest. And with Winnie will be a very good friend of mine and a very good friend of yours. You know Jess Search as the CEO of BritDog, as the host of Good Pitch, as consummate chair and the best wearer of a purple suit at the forum. I've asked Jess to bring her suit onto stage while Winnie speaks to us and to take some notes to shape her questions for her conversation with Winnie. Winnie and Jess. Hey, Winnie. Hey, Winnie. Hey, Jess.
Thank you, Stefan. It's truly an honor to be here. I stand here in an audience of leaders. You are disrupting, you are innovating, you are reforming. You're not on the sidelines. You're determined to be part of the solution. And yet, as much as my heart asks me to be optimistic, I am uneasy about the world forming before us. I see the foundations of global cooperation, global decency that our world built not so long ago, shakier than ever. When I was 18 years old, I fled a brutal dictatorship and found refuge in this country, the United Kingdom. I seized a welcoming hand that I will forever be grateful to. But can you imagine the welcome I would have received today as a young person looking for a future? I keep hearing about a globalization success story for hardworking women in productive industries, especially in the Asian countries like Myanmar. At Oxfam, we work with some of these young women on labor rights. Like millions of others, they are trapped at the voiceless end of supply chains, trapped in debt, forced to compete with each other for poverty jobs. And I know talented African young girls and boys like those in my village, Ruti, in Uganda, who, in fair circumstances, could become our world's greatest space scientists, biotechnologists, and so on. Yet, our world crushes the possibility for them. And then we all lose out. We lose out on their brilliance. They are fetching water, they are carrying firewood. They are among the 800 million people who go hungry every day. It's a loss to all of us. Friends, you could have not picked a more appropriate theme for your forum today than fault lines. Let me offer one very clear line of fault. 8 men now own as much wealth as half of humanity. 3.6 billion other people. The top 1% now own more wealth than the bottom 99%. That's a fault line. You know, as I do, that no amount of charity will bridge that divide. We must indeed break free from this economic model that's rigged against the majority. Thank you. It is a model that sees talent squandered and that invests in those who already have and not those who could do so much. So at Oxfam, we are interested in new ideas for a different economic model, one that can take advantage of technology, innovation, and disruption, but that is driven and shaped by human need. It is a model that should tackle rising inequality, climate change, and that should boost the power of women. We want to discuss ideas about a more human economy. Private enterprise and private endeavor is at the heart of this human economy. We need business to drive this human economy, but it is the right kind of business. businesses that create decent jobs and pay living wages, that restore the environment rather than just extract from it, and that treat women and girls equally. Thank you. Thank you. So critically, we need businesses that are not just dominated by the needs of their investors, but where their workers, the farmers, their suppliers, and the communities have a real stake and power. And getting that right kind of business will need more than just legal compliance or commitments to corporate social responsibility. At Oxfam, we are increasingly convinced it will require some reforms to how companies are structured, what their incentives are. And it's time to be honest too. It's about who has power within those businesses. Increasingly, companies behave as if shareholders are the only interests that matter. This is not just wrong morally, but it hurts the economy and it even hurts the future viability of the business. In the 70s, British companies paid out 10% of their profits as dividends to shareholders. Today, they pay out more than 60% of their profits as dividends. More money for shareholders and more for executives rewarded for increasing margins. All that comes at the expense of workers and producers in supply chains, but also at the expense of investment in innovation. So friends, there is a better way. For centuries, we've had businesses that had more duty of care. Cooperatives, social businesses, worker-owned enterprises have been growing and thriving. Commercial success stories like the Spanish multinational Mondragon, like John Lewis here in the UK, demonstrate that market economies can go beyond an obsession with growing shareholder wealth. Business models like these need support. Without the enticement of high rewards, they won't attract as much capital. Governments will have to support them through tax schemes, credit guarantee schemes, and through other tools. And they will need impact investors who help grow the businesses that prioritize the people they impact, not just their investors. This is the point of the human economy. The market doesn't decide everything. We decide what we want business to deliver for people and planet, and we make those businesses happen. Thank you. So I remain optimistic. Innovators, disruptors, social entrepreneurs, seismic resistors, as Stefan has called you. I urge you to focus your attention on reforming this abusive economic model. You must drive the transition to a more human economy. We can make this a fairer and more sustainable world for us all. Thank you. Well done. Thank you.
Winnie, thank you. So in 2005, you were the co-chair at Davos. The World Economic Forum invited you to co-chair. And that strikes me as quite symbolic and quite unusual both for Oxfam and for the World Economic Forum. Is that a sign that things are really changing in this direction? How was your message received there?
Well, when I first went to the World Economic Forum, I talked about rising economic inequality. And I was allowed into some side meetings, and I spoke, and there was some discomfort in some rooms. But 2 years later, they invited me to be co-chair. I got the sense that some business people, some CEOs, were seeing the signs that all was not well in their societies. But this year, I went again, and I really saw traumatized CEOs. I sat in rooms where top business people, top bankers were saying, business can't go on as usual. There's political anger. Populations are saying there's one rule for the rich and one for ordinary people, that ordinary people pay their fair share of taxes, rich people get away without paying, and they're demanding change, and we must deliver. So for the first time, I started to hear CEOs understanding that rising inequality needs solutions and that the solutions lie with them primarily, and governments too. But they were seeing that they need to do something, and they were talking about, do we need new incentives from our shareholders? Do we need to work to different metrics? Do we need new metrics for determining what success is in our businesses? It was a good conversation.
You must have been about 12 when Idi Amin came to power in Uganda. And I feel like our African colleagues understood the relationship between unchecked inequality and the rise of popular, charismatic leaders a long time before us in the global north understood that this economic inequality has huge political ramifications. So is there a sense to which actually post-Trump you really feel like this is the moment for change? How are you feeling? That it's going to be harder or easier in a post-Trump universe to bring about this kind of profound systemic change you're talking about?
Well, partly it's a deja vu for me, because coming from Africa, where I grew up under dictatorship, people who come on a popular to rescue the population through the gun or through rigged elections, promise heaven on earth and then deliver nothing. We've seen all this. But, sorry.
Teach us.
But more importantly, we have been at the short end of globalization, we people in the South. We have been crying out that the rules are not fair, that trade is not fair, that we will never emerge out of poverty in this kind of skewed global economic system. But our cries were often not listened to, because we are powerless in the global economic governance. But now, with middle classes in the rich countries also saying that, wait a moment, there's a party going on and we are not in it. There are people out there, a very rich few, who have it all, and we don't see how how our children will live even a life as we have lived. So people are uncomfortable, unhappy, and are voting and showing that they are disconnected with the political system. That is important for me from the South. It means that now we can stand on the same side and say that the rules are not fair of the economic model and that they need to be shaped so that we all gain, so that people have decent jobs, so that people who have worked can retire and have a good life, so that children go to school, clinics work, that this can't happen when a few people are capturing all the wealth.
I want us to go back now to the 17-year-old Winnie. As you mentioned in your opening remarks, you came to this country as a political refugee. I know your parents were very politically active under Idi Amin. Your father was jailed several times, and it was decided to send the young Winnie to her sister here in the UK. And you arrived, I believe, rather unprepared for the British weather. I read that your sister had to take you immediately into an Oxfam shop to get you a winter coat. Is it true?
It's true. I got my first coat from an Oxfam shop. It's very true.
So I went and visited. I'm a big fan of an Oxfam shop. So over many years, I've dropped off and picked up, I think, hundreds of things. So in honor of meeting you, I went to my local Oxfam shop. This is me in Chiswick. Of course, the first ever Oxfam shop is in Oxford, is still here on Broad Street. And I asked for some help from Jemima, who was working in there that day, to help me pick out a little gift for you, just in kind of... in reflection of that first Oxfam shop trip you had. So Jemima and I, we chose you this. There's Jemima. She was absolutely thrilled to bits that I was going to be meeting you. So there's a necklace. I left the price tag on it because I felt like it's a sort of different economy with an Oxfam shop, and I thought you might have thought I was cheating, but you can see the label. But Winnie,
Oh my God, I'm so touched.
and
You know? Wow. You know, everything in an Oxfam shop is like 100% profit. Did you know that? Because it's volunteers. It's this ordinary British person who cares about justice in the world, who comes and gives hours of work in the shop and looks after things and does the till, and so everything
my mother
is 100%
my mother was just such a
profit.
volunteer. When I was a toddler, my mother was just such a volunteer in a shop. Yeah. So you were here, you studied, you got degrees in mechanical and aeronautics engineering. You went back to Uganda. You were part of the transitional period after Idi Amin, bringing back democracy. You became an MP for a long time, and now you're back living here. You're living in Oxford. You've been here for 4 years. You're the first, woman Global South leader to be running Oxfam, or indeed any such one of those peer organisations. But you're taking that organisation home with you. I think it's really fascinating. So Oxfam are moving their global headquarters from Oxford, where it was founded 75 years ago.
5 years ago.
Yeah. And you're moving the headquarters to Nairobi. Can you just speak to what that means for you and for Oxfam and for...
Thank you. The way you have put it is so funny. Yeah. That I came to England when I was 18, and now I'm taking this great British institution
in your handbag, putting it in your handbag. And
no,
taking
it's not
it home.
quite like that. It's not quite like that. Oxfam was born here in Oxford. It was started by people who felt really angry at what was happening in the Second World War, that there were people starving in the areas controlled by Hitler, in Greece, in Belgium, in those areas behind the enemy line. And they had food here in England. And they wanted to send food to the starving people on the side controlled by Hitler. But Prime Minister Churchill said no, they couldn't, because he wanted an embargo that would force Hitler to surrender. And these intellectuals from Oxford said, no, but you cannot hold people hostage because you want to win the war. They must get food. So that was the beginning of humanitarianism. And they started right here in Oxford. So this organization started first as a humanitarian, reaching out to people in need and insisting on neutrality and independence, and secondly, as a campaigning organization challenging the policy of a great prime minister. That's the history of Oxfam. But then Oxfam has grown, and now there are 20 other Oxfams all over the world, including Oxfams in Canada, Oxfam Australia, Oxfam India, Oxfam Mexico. We are many Oxfams, 20 of us. And now we have a headquarters that still is here in Oxford, this rich, leafy suburb. And we do our work mainly in the developing countries where poverty is, 95 countries, mostly in the South. So we see that for our legitimacy, for our relevance, for our impact, we need to move the headquarters of this family of 20 Oxfams to the South and stand there in solidarity with those who live in poverty and fight with them, alongside them. So we are moving the headquarters, but Oxfam Great Britain, the first Oxfam, will remain here with its headquarters here in Oxford. So I'm taking the international, the glue that binds the 20 to Kenya. And Oxfam Great Britain, the mother of all the Oxfams, stays right here.
It's going to be a beautiful relationship.
Yeah.
Winnie, our time is up. I just wanted to say, when we were out the back and we heard the opening poem together, and you said how much you loved Maya Angelou too.
Yeah.
And I just wanted to say that meeting you reminds me of one of my favorite of her quotes, when she said, "My mission in life is not just to survive, but to thrive, and to do some with some passion, some compassion, some humor, and some style." Winnie, thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you very much. So where do I go? You go off the way you came.
So thank you, Winnie. You've given us a compelling vision of a new, more human economy. And our next guest is one of the most exciting businessmen whose work is helping to make that necessity a reality. He's a brilliant entrepreneur. When he arrived in America at the age of just 22, he spoke very little English and had only a few $1,000s in his pocket. In fact, I believe he even milked cows at one point to pay his way through college. Today, he is the founder of the multi-billion-dollar yogurt enterprise, Chobani. Yeah, that alone. And he's not sure he'd call himself a social entrepreneur, but we'll talk about that when he comes out here. But he does say that business is still the most effective way to change the world. And his mission with Chobani is to inspire a new way of business, a new way of work, and a new way of innovation. Skoll World Forum, please welcome Hamdi from Chobani. So Hamdi, you studied political science at Ankara University, and I think that means I can throw you right in the deep end with a really big question, which is, how does capitalism need to change?
I quickly understood that you couldn't change it with politics, you could change it with yogurt. So, and I left that and started making yogurt. And just let me tell you this. I've heard about this, but I've never thought it was going to be this. And Jeff, thank you. This is amazing. The energy here, and I've been to very energetic places, but this is what we look for today. This is what we need. This is what we are, like a thirsty person in the desert. This is the human spirit we need, and I'm so glad to be here. So thank you very much for
You're so welcome.
Me. Look, you introduced me as a businessman. I hated CEOs and I hated the rich growing up. I'm a son of a shepherd, a nomad. I grew up in the mountains. Beautiful life, going up in the mountains and making cheese and yogurt and coming back to our village, growing up as a Kurdish. And we would see the rich and their behavior and the businesses, large companies, and it didn't align what my mother was teaching, so I never thought I would end up becoming this. I never thought I would get involved with business. I would always think of myself to be, other side. And when I was building my work, the only thing that I wanted to do is I don't want to be the one who I grow up hating. So how do I do that? So every day there's a quality check that you do, and you say, okay, have I become that one yet? And I haven't publicly said this many times, except my colleagues that I work with in the plant last time we did the Chobani shares, and I'll say it here, it's very private, because I'm really inspired. I put my mom's, in Kurdish tradition, you put some headscarves in their head, and she had a green one that the day that she passed away, and I always hold on to it, and Louis knows. My Chobani hat, I've always put that under for years, and for as much as I remember when I started Chobani. The reason I did that is, if I get drunk, if I lose the way it is, and if there's nobody can correct me, there's only one person could correct me, that would be my mom. So if I carry that in here, I know I could do wrong, but she would teach me otherwise. I mean, we need powerful people, not only relatives, but powerful people in our life to keep us right. Because in the end, those ideas are right. What Winnie said, it was 100% right. But when you are in the world of business, entrepreneurship, and social entrepreneurship, whenever it is, you get engaged with money. And then you get engaged with power, you get engaged with fame, you get engaged with a lot of stuff. And it's very easy to lose the sight of it, and I have. Then you are in search of someone to come to tell you, okay, you gotta come to the right place. And then the business is fun. And you asked me outside why you don't call yourself a social entrepreneur, and I met Bill this morning, who are the founder of the idea, and there are hundreds of them. Of course, I would be honored to be called social entrepreneurship. But what we have to do, and I'm just going to stop there, is it's okay to be angry. I love things, but I hate things too. but also, we need to channel that into a right place. And I didn't want Chobani organization to become like an idea of a church or an NGO or anything like that. I wanted to be a competitive innovator and angry about the competitor that's doing wrong, which is for us is the big food and the type of a CEO or president or whatever they call themselves, and being angry about it and to channel that to a certain way, and you win in the marketplace. The good people has to win. The good people has to find a way to win.
So much nicer. You think so much nicer. We're angry, right, guys?
Yeah. So then I'm a social entrepreneur.
Okay, all right. You're in. Let's talk about your response to the refugee crisis. It's something which you've been involved in both as a philanthropist and as a businessman, and I think that's really interesting. We heard Winnie saying, charity cannot be the only response to these problems, and I feel like you've come at that in both ways. Because you donated $2 million to UNHCR, and you've also made a pledge to give away more of your wealth to the issue. But you've also really tried to embed a response to that into your business itself. I think that currently 400 of your employees, 1/5 of your employees, are refugees. Do you want to speak to how you got involved and what your philosophy is?
Sure. Starting at Chobani, I started in upstate New York, a little town, and a factory was closed after 90 years. And the way I started is 5 factory workers and myself. And a little anecdote there is the first board meeting I had was for old craft workers and myself. And the first board meeting, we decided that we're going to paint the wall outside. And it hasn't been painted for 25 years, right? So, and the guy, one of them said, Hamdi, that's fine, we'll do that, but tell me you have more ideas than that. And I honest to God, I did not have any other idea. And these guys are going to bet on me not to move or not to look for any other jobs. They just lost the job. So, and I was the only Turkish guy, Kurdish, Turkish, whatever, and in that town, they had not seen a guy like me before. And time passes, we start the business, it's moving, we're adding people, and I hired all the people that left Kraft at that time. They lost their job, they came back. That was 55, and then we became 100, and then became the 200, and then we expanded our, geography. And I lived in Utica, which was about 30 miles north of that little town, and I heard that there are refugees are settled in this town that they were having a very tough time finding a job. And we were expanding, and I hired everyone in that area, and I'm looking more, and I went to the refugee center, and it was true. It was one of the settlement places. And I said, what's the problem? They said, well, couple. One is, they're different. The people are not used to it yet. Second is language. They don't speak English well. And then another one is transportation. So they don't have driver license to be able to drive. And I said, look, but there were some others. I said, look, well, we can hire translators, and we can put buses, and we can train them. And we did. And those simple solutions, we start hiring them. They come, and amazing. So today in South Edmiston, and I did the same thing in Idaho, in Twin Falls. Proudly, we have 19 different nationalities in our company that comes from different parts of the world as refugee. And one beautiful thing is we created this beautiful community in these plants, and people built their life making yogurt, and the friendship and this beautiful relationship that among the locals and the people from, someone from Myanmar, someone from Somalia, someone from Syria, and watching this whole thing to happen in front of your eye. And this is not something I've done last year or year before. It's been in it forever. And when the Syrian crisis went up into the scale, I saw this picture, I think it was in New York Times, that this Yazidi woman, hands were up in the air. And I know the face. I am from the region. I know I know the volcano is going, the burning is going in her heart. And you can tell there are many people are following, and she's going towards the mountains when they get attacked and they lost everything. That was a calling for me. And then I got personally involved. I created a foundation called Tent, and I did the pledge that Jeff did and every others did. And it became my reason of doing what I'm doing. And I've learned a lot since then. I was conscious about the crisis of refugee, but I had no idea there was 65 million people. I had no idea the average refugee lives in the camp is 17 years. I had no idea that every year UNHCR and some other organizations runs out of food and runs out of money to provide food and shelter, the basic needs. I had no idea that people who live in those conditions are hopeless, and they have lack of education and women's rights and employment. So all that stuff, and I saw hardworking, heroic working of the aid workers on the field, which I visited, but I also saw bureaucracy. I saw waste. I saw a lot of waste of time and money. And I said, we have to bring this entrepreneurship way into this. We have to come in, and we have to bring the more business world. And I reached out to other CEOs and colleagues, and today we have 70 amazing companies that pledged their ability, their money, or their technology to come in and tackle this problem. And it's everybody's problem.
You sort of let that go by. I really want to underline that. Sorry, yeah, because people are beginning to applaud. I think those that know the story, because you basically went to Davos and you said that it was mind-blowing how little companies were doing to provide employment for refugees. And you urged other companies to join you, and you grew that, in cohort. And now, yes, you're at 70, and this includes some really big companies too. I mean, this is a huge achievement. Sorry, now you can applaud him.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it is, when I look at it, I think one of the most urgent crises that humanity is facing is this problem. I mean, we have other problems. Bono is a great example of how you start from somewhere and look at where AIDS and corruption and other issues that he's dealing with. It is the branding, it is the approach, It is the elevation of the issue above the politics area to the area of every single individual can understand. And I trust that every one of us are good people. We just have to find a way to connect that energy to the problem. And if we don't fix that, what will happen? Safety is going to be a problem. We might make it to the Mars, but if we leave those people behind, this world cannot go any further. Humanity will not go further. And if you have a little girl who just passed through the ocean, who lost his little brother and made it to a tent, and this is real things that are happening. And if we are watching that and celebrating that going to the Mars, and I don't know if that's the humanity that we are all looking for. And I know we are all aligned in that idea. We just have to work harder, and we just have to work faster, because this issue has no time to waste. And the world it is, where we are going, how we are talking about the walls, we just said, not the walls, the bridges. I truly believe every single person, one person, either voice or time or money or whatever that is, it adds up and it becomes something. And if it comes from the right direction, like direction that comes from here, it is so powerful that it can grow so fast that we can overcome all the problems. And I know it because I've done it. I've started with 5 people, and we elevated ourselves into this idea that we could create something else. In 5 years, we've done something that never been done before. It's the human spirit that needs to be lifted up. And I truly believe that we can do that. We do.
Can you speak a bit more about your relationship with your workers? Because to Winnie's point about challenging inequality, this sense of workers needing to have a stake, as she said, in the work that they do, I know that's something that you've been thinking about, and you've shared some equity already, and I wonder if you could speak to that philosophy.
Same thoughts of what Winnie talked about, and Winnie talked about is, I started there, and I watch how we built this wealth, and a factory worker who I started with is, okay, I paid twice more than everybody else did. I had 401k, I had health insurance, almost all of it paid, and I had bonuses, all that stuff. Still, I'm making a calculation. And when I made the calculation is how are they going to buy the house, how are they going to afford the gas, and how are they going to get food for their children that is good? And then later, how are they going to retire? The math just doesn't make any sense. And it would be unfair to watch that this most beautiful thing is being created from the ashes of the others, and not to see others to benefit from it as much as it is. And it clicked me in the beginning, and I had this in a long time. You know what the challenge was? The law. Believe it or not, the most difficult part, I'd worked for 2 years, not to be treated as a public company, because I have 2,000 people and I want to make everybody a partner, not to be treated as a public company and give my shares to my employees. And I had to spend millions to be able to do that. So the system is not allowing you to be able to do that, and needs to be changed completely. And today, I have 2,000 partners, and it is not a gift. It is the recognition of what's right. That's how I see it.
There are definitely people here who are very interested in changing those kinds of systems. And in fact, the chaps that invented the B Corp as a mechanism are amongst the Skoll Foundation's grantees. So they're probably here. So maybe that's something which a connection can be made to make the model that you've discovered more widely available for other people. But I want to just quickly go back to your childhood and teenage years. You kind of said it very quickly at the beginning that you grew up in a family who were working with a cheese-making business. You said it very quickly, but I just wanted to spend a kind of moment there. So what were your teenage years like? Were your Saturday chores just totally out of control? Being born into a small family business in Eastern Turkey?
Yeah, it's nomadic life. It's up in the mountains, and there is not a day goes by that I don't go back for a moment, that I don't make that connection. It could be, I don't know, leaves coming from the tree, and then or a wind hits you in a different direction, or somebody looks like somebody. You always have a connection to your past, and I always remember my past, that simple life, as my source of everything I do in the life. And that's the thing, the immigrants as myself, and including refugees, when we come, we bring something with us to another place. And I think...
Yeah, you brought mad yogurt skills. Hashtag.
Hashtag.
Mad yogurt skills.
Culture. We do. And by the Euphrates River, mountains of Munzur, and I don't exactly know which day I was born. I know it's October because as nomad we were coming down, and when you're coming back from the mountains, it's about end of September or early October, mid-October. So I'll give you one example how it was, and I'm not saying we didn't have issues. People fought and all that stuff, but there was this sense of security that in the barn, if there was a fire, and if you lost all your sheep, and let's say you have 200 of them, and that's what you live on, and your family you support on, you know that the next morning, everybody's going to pick one of their best sheep and bring it to you. And in the end, you're going to have 200 sheep. And nobody's going to burn their barn, but they know that's going to happen if that happens. And that's a social security. That's one that you know that if you're down, there's somebody, even the person that you fought a couple of years ago, you had an argument, that was the social pressure and order that it will bring it to you. And you would live in the mountains under the tent, and the men were the shepherds. They would go up in the mountains, and there was women and kids, and you know that you were secure under those stars with maybe one dog, not because you had guns or anything else, because you knew that in this order, in social order, you will be safe. And that's where I lived. And
that's a very human economy.
Yeah, that's very human economy, and that's where we have to come. And the tagline is here: is how do we create that social trust in every individual, every child, and wherever in the world, that if I'm down, somebody's out there in the world cares about me and is going to bring their head. And it exists. You just have to multiply, and I think it has to change its form to become more. I don't want to use the word aggressive, but maybe a little bit louder, a little bit more aggressive, a little bit more, because otherwise this is not just being good or right. This is just being more profitable. This is just being a better living. This is just being, you can add on to this, and then you say, hey, investor, you can make money on this too. If you only care about this, you can care. And we do need scholars, we do need thinkers, we do need all leaders of social elements. But God, we need businesses to step up, because we have tried all the different government models we have, and I have believed in one of them in the past. I do believe in free market. I really do. I really do that it's needed, and I really do think that it moves the humanity forward. And if we fill that model with these people, you're in heaven. That's how I believe.
I want to be in heaven with you, Hamdi.
Yeah.
Sounds pretty good to me.
Make yogurt, yeah.
We've run out of time, but before I let you go, in the same Oxfam shop, I had to pick something up for you too, Jemima and I, and because we know that you're going to join Winnie and I as a great defender of the rights of women and girls too.
Absolutely.
We bought you a pink tie in the Oxfam shop.
Oh my God. Purple suit and pink tie.
Please give Hamdi a huge round of applause.
I don't get a tie, but I do like 200 sheep. I think that's some kind of metaphor for what we do. So thank you, Jess, and thank you, Hamdi. And now, just some very quick notes about things that are new for this year that even those people who've been here many times won't know. Virtual reality. There was a single virtual reality film here last year that was such a hit that this year, Oculus for Good have brought us 8 films. So when you go into the business school, you will see a booth and you will see Oculus for Good. Go and check out an alternative reality. I wanted to recognize very briefly some rather extraordinary and rather young people. I think in the room there are MasterCard emerging leaders. Welcome. Welcome, hello. And I have a very small test for you. Just before the very end of this afternoon's session, I'm relying on you to catch the reference. Okay? That's all I'm going to say at this point. And last, and for the first time, there will be a TEDx Skoll on Friday afternoon at the Sheldonian. Okay? Buy a ticket. Take a cushion. Be amazed. And at the risk of stating the obvious, events like this don't organize themselves. And very, very many people make it happen. And thank you, all of you, and thank you to our very longest standing supporter, who's in the room somewhere. I can't see him, but I wanted to recognize Bob Anibale of Citi. Is he in the room? There he is. And last, I wanted to show you a very short film about the shared portal. It's an amazing experience in a box and is here at the forum. Ladies and gentlemen, the shared portal.
Portals is a global public art initiative where we take shipping containers, paint them gold, and equip them with immersive AV so that when you enter one, you feel like you're in the same room as someone in an identical space somewhere else on Earth.
The first portal was our first experiment on connecting strangers that had never met and facilitate conversations and see if people liked it. It was then I realized that we had hit on something. You will walk in and have a memorable moment with someone.
It's an amazing technology, making it seem like you're standing right in front of me.
We had joint concerts. There was an Afghan rapper in Afghanistan. He rapped while 2 dancers at the University of Maryland kind of interpreted this rap.
A young man that I spoke to lives in the same neighborhood that I grew up in.
These encounters have created an incredible time capsule of this moment in our collective history. We are adding portals in Myanmar and Detroit. What we are trying to shape is a global network that everyone owns together and that becomes ever more important, meaningful, impactful with each new point in the network.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you, take care.
Thank you.
Check it out, the golden box. It's amazing. Our next speaker works at the intersection of science and human fallibility. He's a physician, a writer, a very public intellectual. He was a student here at Oxford, and because I do my research, I can tell you that he also played in a band called, wait for it, Thousands of Breaded Shrimp. His BBC Reith lectures were broadcast to hundreds of millions of people. It's my very great pleasure to introduce to you Atul Gawande.
Thank you. In 1976, 2 philosophers, Samuel Gorvitz and Alasdair MacIntyre, wrote one of my favorite essays called The Nature of Human Fallibility. And in it, they pointed out that there were basically just 2 reasons why we would fail at doing anything that we might set out to do. One reason was ignorance. We have a limited understanding of the world and all of its physical laws that apply to it. But the second reason they called ineptitude, meaning the knowledge exists, but an individual or a group of individuals fail to apply it correctly. Now, to overcome ignorance, we've applied science. I would call it a particular kind of science, breakthrough science, and we've come through this last century with an extraordinary range of breakthroughs. For example, if you live in the developed world, we have advanced from a world where the majority of the world has to be farmers to one where we can feed an entire population with less than 2% of our population being farmers. We have reached a point where we have the knowledge to help you live, instead of on average in 1900, less than to your mid-40s, to where it's routine. You can expect you have a great chance to live past 80 years old and climbing. That kind of science of breakthrough has been how we overcame ignorance. But how do we overcome ineptitude? Or as I prefer to call it, just plain old failure to deliver without all the judgment applied to it. And the answer, I think, is incredibly important because we are at a pivot point in history. We are in a generation that is an unusual generation. For virtually the entire existence of humanity, our lives had been governed primarily by ignorance, meaning that the knowledge didn't exist to help us understand how we overcome our illnesses and disease and our lack of food and other conditions like that. By contrast, after this last century, we are in a place where ineptitude, the failure to deliver, is as important in governing lives as ignorance was. That is how far we have come. But then how do we overcome ineptitude? The key struggle has been complexity. In my field, in public health and in healthcare, for example, we came through this last century having discovered that the human body has 60,000 different ways it can go wrong. 60,000 different diagnoses and conditions that we have discovered in the last century. And in the second half of that last century, we have discovered 4,000 medical and surgical procedures and techniques, 6,000 drugs that can relieve your suffering, improve the quality of your life, and often cure the illnesses that you face. And so now our job has become to deploy that capability town by town to every person alive. I've said that this, I think, is humankind's most ambitious endeavor. And the way we can discover how to overcome ineptitude, discover how we overcome failure to delivery, is still science. But it's a science of delivery and systems. We have had some primitive thinking about how we create delivery. Our thinking about delivery is first we teach you. Here is what you should do. You should do X. You should raise your crops the following way. You should deliver babies the following way. You should wash your hands. And then we get very frustrated that you're not doing what you're supposed to do. We go to a second stage and we say, you must do this. We issue mandates and directives and incentives. And we get some advancement from that. But we are still frustrated because an awful lot doesn't change. And that's where we come to the third stage of modern development, which is to systematize what we're trying to accomplish, to make the way we deliver babies or the way we raise food or the way we wash our hands the norm. And that means thinking about our systems that can be as simple as a checklist or as complex as different kinds of technologies. Now, we ended up launching a place called Ariadne Labs at Harvard and the Brigham and Women's Hospital as a place to try to find out how do we begin to create that kind of systematization in healthcare. Think about traffic, for example, how you got here. We have billions of people now on the roads, and yes, we've taught them how to drive their cars. And then when they don't do it that way, we enforce how they have to drive their cars. But the secret to the way we get around is the design of the roads and the design of the cars and some basic, very simple rules of the road, which allow billions of people to travel at extraordinary speeds and yet accomplish it with incredible safety. So what could be our rules of the road and the systems for our other areas of extraordinary complexity? At a place like we've built, we're trying to find those points of leverage at every stage of human life, from birth to death. And I'll zero in on one core example, which is birth. Childbirth is still the major cause of death for the young and for women across large swaths of the world. And we've learned in the last century that there are 7 big killers, whether it is infection of the mom or infection of a baby. Asphyxia, 10% of babies are born not breathing. Prematurity, hemorrhage, obstructed labor, or hypertensive disease for the women. And we have known practices to address them all that have largely eliminated the likelihood that you would die from those conditions. But they are missing. They are missing in a place like this, in northern India, at a typical birth center, in a state where neonates have a 5% likelihood of death. 1 in 20 die in or around the time of birth. And the reason why is those basic practices are missing. Hand washing, that critical step for prevention of infection, below 1%. Clean gloves, not available in 30% of deliveries. Or, I'll show you this picture. This is a baby 15 minutes after birth. And you can see the basics not having been dried with a clean cloth. No one watching. The most basic, not being warmed, the most powerful incubator there is putting the baby skin to skin to the mom. And then an unsterile clamp across the cord. This baby is alive, but just. And it does not surprise you, they have only a 1 in 20 chance. Now, in the work that we have done, we worked with the World Health Organization, who came to us, and we got an engineer out of the aviation world, out of Boeing, where we structured the most simple kind of system, just a checklist, in order to simplify and organize for the front line and for the managers of the birth center how to recognize gaps in care. And this is a checklist that brought those known practices, around 30 or so, together at critical moments. When the mother first comes into a birth center in labor, a second set of checks, just as the mother is starting to push to make sure you have everything ready and available that is required to take care of the baby, and the mom. And then in the first minutes after birth, the basic steps to resuscitate a baby if they're not breathing, or address and prevent bleeding from the mom. And then finally, before the mother and baby go home, the key steps that can happen along the way. Now, we carried out a trial where we were working with people at every stage of care. This trial was in North India, in the state of Uttar Pradesh, the largest state in India, 200 million people. It would be the 5th largest country in the world. And in that state, we rolled out in about a third of the districts in 120 birth centers. Half of them we just observed, and in the other half, in a randomized trial, we carried out a quality coaching system for the whole team. This was aiming to provide some basic engagement, teaching, and then ultimately coaching, visiting at the bedside, side by side, working not only with the nurses, who are the primary ones who do the deliveries, but the doctors, the procurement clerk, and the managers at the highest level, giving them coaching and feedback and observation about where their gaps were on not following the basic steps of the checklist, and then offering a supportive hand for being able to solve those problems. Now, where we've gotten is that after 8 months of that coaching, including teaching champions who would carry on the quality work, we've now reached 160,000 deliveries, and just a couple months ago completed an evaluation of what happens. And what we found in the results was an extraordinary thing. First of all, if we could reach greater than 80% of the practices, you achieve a greater than 60% reduction in mortality. Now, the problems are, the control group was at 35% of delivering the practices, and they had no improvement over time, over the course of the several years of running the study. In the intervention group, we made incredible progress. You can see out of 18 practices we measured, you have a shift to the right. But the median improvement only got to 70%. On one level, that is an incredible amount of accomplishment in a very short amount of time to bring places that weren't washing hands to begin doing so, not treating the right kind of care for bleeding or for rescuing the baby. But on another, we also saw that only 13% got to that 80% goal. And in crisis situations, it was even lower. And yet, you could see the path. Here, at another birth center, this is 1 month after we completed the coaching, you could see the difference. The coaches come in and they offer, what do we want to work on where you're missing gaps in the care? And they said, first, can we clean this place? Yes. So let's have you learn to talk to your leadership about, let's bleach clean this delivery room. And you know what? We want privacy screens between the moms. Just some basic dignity, please. And then step by step, they began working on everything that was needed. This is a mom who came in by ambulance, her third child. She, on arrival in the triage area, her water burst. So they brought her directly to the delivery room. And I give you the time clock here so you can see how fast things can happen. It's 1:57 in the afternoon. 3 minutes later, they've measured the blood pressure, which was done almost not at all in any of the birth centers. They checked the heart rate of the baby, which was perfect at 143, something again that was not being done. 8 minutes later, they had washed hands, put on gloves, done an examination, and found that the mother was fully dilated, her cervix was fully dilated, and she was ready to push. Next, they went, following down the checklist, checking all of the equipment, and seeing that they had a baby mask, sterile equipment, that everything was prepared as it should have been. At 2:12, 3 minutes later, one push, and this baby was out. You better be ready. Now, I want to tell you, I'm standing here, I'm watching this delivery, and the entire mood in that room changed. The nurse is looking at the community health worker that came with the mom, because that baby is not breathing. She's blue, she's floppy, and she's going to be one of that 1 in 20. But they knew now, they had the system in place to understand how to make it the norm that they do something. So right away, she has a clean cloth and she's drying the baby, and that's the first step for a child not breathing. You have to stimulate that baby and dry them, and that often gets them going. That didn't get her going. 30 seconds later, they have completely wiped her down and she is not breathing. After a minute of this not happening, she's made her way to the kit, grabbed the suction device. They don't have a mechanical suction, so it's a suction device you use with your mouth. And 25 seconds after that, she is suctioning out her nasal passageways and going down into the airway. The other nurse has gone to get the bag and mask to give that baby some fresh breaths. But this was enough. and I saw that baby start to breathe with just 2 minutes without a breath. 5 minutes later, he had a healthy, breathing baby crying on her mother's breast, warmed skin to skin, the mother reaching out and grabbing the hand of the nurse who could breathe easily now. This is what we can accomplish. We have sites now in 30 countries adopting this work, from single centers in places like Italy to the entire country of Namibia. But it is critical to do what we have not done when this happens. Invest in formal experimentation, data, and learning about the truth of the gaps and successes. What does it take to get to the 80% and 90% performance that makes that life happen? We have to do this well beyond birth and even beyond health. The values that we bring in health are the values that we all have. They are human decency. They are reason. They are a belief that we must be part of strengthening the community. And they are a belief that all lives have equal worth. Systems science and innovation is the next big opportunity to advance human well-being and health. But we've made a massive underinvestment. We are still stuck in the 20th century mentality that a breakthrough innovation is what we need, without understanding that we also need the follow-through innovations as well. We are a place that can change that. I checked back with this mother who delivered that baby. The baby's name is Anshika, and it means beautiful. Thank you.
And now, it's my very great pleasure to introduce a conversation between two people I admire a great deal. In all the years I've been doing this, my introductions to one of them have been getting shorter and shorter. That's partly because he's a very modest man, and it's partly because you all know him very well. So I'm just going to say, please welcome our founder and the person without whom we wouldn't be here. Jeff Skoll, hello. Hello, Jeff. Jeff will be joined by Dr. Jim Kim. Jim co-founded Partners in Health. Go and see, by the way, Bending the Arc on Wednesday in this very theatre. He won a MacArthur Genius Prize in 2003, and he is, of course, the president of the World Bank. The World Bank was created in 1944 at the Bretton Woods Conference with two very simple goals: to decrease the number of people living in poverty, and to foster income growth for the bottom 40% in every country. It's now a huge organization with 10,000 employees in 120 offices around the world. Paul Farmer, well known to you all, describes how he and Jim used to laugh at the motto carved over the entry to the World Bank headquarters. And that motto reads, "Our dream is a world free of poverty." And Jim said to Paul, "Let's change it from a dream to a plan, and then we don't need to mock it anymore." That sounds like a plan. Please welcome Jim Kim.
Yeah, thank you. Welcome. Well, thank you so much, Jim, for joining us. And I've realized how complex the world of the World Bank is. And you're the first physician, anthropologist, social entrepreneur who's run the World Bank. And growing up as a kid in Iowa. But I have one question. So I've had the privilege of traveling the world the last decade. I've been to all 7 continents and some many times. I've never seen a branch of the World Bank. What's up with that? No ATM. But I'd love to start with something Stefan referenced, a film that covers a lot of ground in your history. It's a film called Bending the Arc, about partners in health, which Jim co-founded with Ophelia Dahl and Paul Farmer. And the film was a partnership of the Skoll Foundation and the Sundance Institute. And I've chosen a short clip to kick us off.
Sure. Only time that I hear talk among people like us, academics, of shrinking resources, and when we talk about things that have to do with poor people.
The main resistance always is cost. These patients, black people, brown people, poor people, just don't matter.
We feel that what could come out of this meeting is that the data that we showed you of our success in treating MDR-TB could lead to a vision of expanding resources that could be very powerful.
That meeting was, can it be done in developing countries? Boom, done. We proved it can be done in developing countries. And we actually showed how this was done using community health workers. The second step was, can you bring the drug prices down? Because they kept saying, how can you say that we should treat MDR-TB when the drugs are so expensive? I asked some people from the World Health Organization, so do you know if the drugs are on patent or not? And then they said, well, we don't know. Now, I couldn't believe it. I said, how can you declare a death sentence on everybody in the poor world with MDR-TB and not even know whether the drugs are patented or not? Because if they're not patented, we could drop the prices almost immediately. I asked one of our team members, just find out if these things are on patent. And he came back and he said, all of them are off, and they've been off for a long time. And we were just shocked. No one had asked that question before.
So Jim, we chose that clip because it really represents your days fighting for the resources to address the sick and the poor and the forgotten, and going up against the halls of power to gain these resources. And now, some people see you sit in the halls of power. How does that influence the way you guide the World Bank?
Well, Jeff, let me tell you the story of how I got the job, because it came completely out of the blue. Tim Geithner, who was Secretary of the Treasury at the time, he called me, and Tim, I was president of Dartmouth at the time, and Tim was class of '83 of Dartmouth, and the only reason he ever called me is because he had a friend who had a kid who he wanted to get into Dartmouth. Right? So he called me and he said, hey, Jim, would you be interested in being president of the World Bank? And I said, you mean the World Bank? He said, yeah. And I said, well, what do you want me to do? I said, can you come down and talk to the president? And I said, when? And he said, how about tomorrow? So I did actually go down, and I was sitting there, and they had a copy of a book that I had edited along with Paul Farmer. Is Paul and Ophelia, are they here now? They're here somewhere, right? All right. And so it was called Dying for Growth, Global Inequality in the Health of the Poor. And it was essentially a 500-page screed against the World Bank. And I had actually been part of a movement called 50 Years is Enough, in which we were trying to close the World Bank on its 50th anniversary. And so I had this out-of-body experience where I don't go through, we don't go through Senate confirmation, but the president doesn't want to put someone up who then will embarrass him. So they were doing a huge background check of me, and they had a copy of Dying for Growth. These lawyers, brilliant lawyers, who were asking me all kinds of questions, and they had a copy, and every page was read, was earmarked, and I looked at that and I said, oh, so am I not a candidate anymore? And they said, no, it's okay. Now, I have to say, it would only be President Obama who would do that. Let me just take a drink. But then let me, so then I walked into the Oval Office and there's President Obama. I'd never met him before, and I'd been obsessed with him since he made that speech in 2004. And so first thing he did is he sat down and he said, well, Jim, you're a physician and an anthropologist, and people are all telling me that I should hire a macroeconomic, or I should nominate a macroeconomist. And so, there are people, and he actually mentioned my friend Ernesto Zedillo, who's here, I think. He said, what am I going to tell people like Ernesto Zedillo, that I hired you instead of a macroeconomist, to be the president of the World Bank? And I said, well, President Obama, have you ever read your mother's PhD dissertation thesis? I was such a nerd that she had done her PhD in anthropology, my field, and there was the only way to get her dissertation was to write to the University of Michigan archives, where they keep all the PhD dissertations. And I was like one of 5 people who had ever requested her dissertation, and I read the whole thing. And he said, well, yeah, I have read it. And I said, well, you'll then know that your mother wrote that the Indonesian artisanal industry, which she studied, everyone predicted that globalization would wipe it out. But her 1,000-page thesis showed that, in fact, the Indonesian artisanal industry flourished with globalization. And I said, I'm not going to give you the view from 30,000 feet like a macroeconomist would, but I've been on the ground for 25 years, and I'll tell you how the programs are working on the ground. He looked at me and he said, I get that. And then later, about a year and a half later, we were having a beer somewhere, right? And he said, Jim, that was the best ploy to get a job I've ever seen. All this to say, Secretary Clinton nominated me. Tim Geithner, my Dartmouth buddy, seconded it, and it was President Obama. I don't think that very many heads of state would nominate someone who actually tried to tear down the institution 20 years before. So I'm just very grateful. I'll always be very grateful to President Obama.
So it was a very straight and direct path from childhood to head of the World Bank with no bumps along the way.
But let me just say, I hope everyone comes to see the film tomorrow night, because in fact, the spirit of Partners in Health, and it's really, if I could sum it up in 2 ways. One of them, and you'll see in the film, is this notion of making a preferential option for the poor. Now, that comes from Catholic social teaching, but we were an organization that had people from every faith, people from no faith, and what we had found over years is that this notion of, well, what does it mean for the poorest? What is the right thing to do for the poorest of the poor? That always worked for us, because it suggested that there were things that it was not a preferential option for. It's not a preferential option for your own idea, right? And we saw so many people come to us and said, the poor are poor because they haven't really listened to my idea, or a preferential option for a particular group. It's a preferential option for the poor, and it's the hardest thing to sort of remain true to. And the other part is because we were embedded in Harvard Medical School in Atul. We were residents together in Brigham and Women's Hospital, and what he's showing you is, and we've worked together on this notion of a science of delivery, is that you've got to look at the evidence. What is the evidence, and can the evidence lead us to the right conclusion about making a preferential option for the poor? And those 2 ideas, I have absolutely not swerved from those 2. And those are the fundamental ideas that still drive the work we do today.
Well, I think it is probably no fluke of history that sometimes the right person comes into the right place at the right time. And as many of you know, in 2014, there was a global pandemic in Ebola, and the epidemic became a pandemic because the world was a little slow to get off the ground. Doctors Without Borders had found it, reported it to the WHO, which had been drastically cut and was a little slow in responding. But all of a sudden, we have a physician who spent his life in health at the head of the World Bank. Jim, I wonder if you want to tell that story.
Well, it was, I'd heard stories about the Ebola outbreak, and that's not what the World Bank does. We do not respond to outbreaks, and we don't respond to short-term emergencies usually, because that's not what we do. And so I just kept thinking, they must be on this, because I was actually at WHO in 2003 during the transition period for J.W. Lee, who I worked for at WHO, and I remember the fantastic team that was taking care of SARS, and I said, well, where's Mike Ryan? Where's David Heyman? Where are all these guys who have been so great at responding to epidemics? And it turns out that they'd all left WHO. And that was the first sign. But then I called Paul, and as I always do, I call Paul. And Paul had been on the ground, and he just said, Jim, I have never seen so much virus anywhere. I've never seen anything like this. And so Paul's seen everything. So when he said that, I thought, oh my God, now what do we do? So I started calling around saying, well, where's the response? Where are the literally hundreds of millions, if not billions of dollars? Because it's once there's that much virus in the system, which is what Paul told me about, is that once there's that much out there, there's just very little that you can do unless you mount a massive effort, and there was nothing going on. So I talked to my board, and I said, this is not what we normally do, but if we don't send a message, no one's going to do anything. So on August 4th, 2014, we announced that we were going to provide $400 million to fight Ebola, and we got the money moving within 9 days. Right? Now, anyone who's taken a loan from the World Bank knows that that's right. That's why we don't have ATMs, by the way. Right. So we moved the money in 9 days, and there was an excitement. And frankly, again, we are not the ones who do this, but I did things like I called Mike Ryan myself and said, Mike, you got to get back in. You got to help us with this, because he had been involved in the response to every Ebola outbreak in history. And he was on the sidelines working in another organization because the board did not support WHO to scale up its efforts on pandemics. But at the end, what we ended up putting $1.6 billion into just the immediate response, and the overall thing cost about $10 billion. The question I asked was, can't we do this better? Isn't there a way of building a fail-safe instrument that the minute something gets bad, it automatically releases? So I went and talked to the reinsurance companies. That's the great thing about this job. Just about anyone will talk to me. Even Jeff Skoll will talk to me. And so I talked to the CEO of Munich Re, the reinsurance company. And Nicholas von Baumhart, a great guy, said, we would love to be part of that conversation, but we're never invited to participate. And so the great Paul Pullman, I know he works with you guys. I said, Paul, can you organize a meeting at Davos where we bring public health people and the reinsurance industry together? And so they brought them all together, and we started saying, why don't we have an insurance instrument that will release automatically once the epidemic reaches a certain level? And so we asked the insurance company folks, and they said, look, we can insure anything. And for us, having insurance in the picture will help us, because then we could potentially avoid not only the life insurance policies that they would pay, but the thing that kills them is the business disruption policies, because that's what happens in a pandemic. Businesses just shut down. And so they kept at it, and we kept saying, oh, it's so complicated, it's so complicated. But we put people in a room for about 5 months, and they came out with a set, not all at once, but over a period of 5 months, they came up with parametric triggers. And so we've come up with a new instrument that's called parametric insurance. It's not the usual claim-based insurance. Something bad happens, you make a claim, and they give you money. Once you hit certain triggers, the money will automatically release. And at first it was so complicated, but then the insurance company guys kept saying, you know, everything is complicated at first. Automobile insurance was really complicated when we first started it. We didn't know that seatbelts were effective. We didn't know that speed bumps helped. We didn't know that shoulder harnesses were even better. But it was great because there was a synergy. The insurance industry was interested in keeping people safer so they didn't have to pay more claims. And so now the insurance industry is interested in preventing a pandemic so that they don't have to pay more claims. The incentives are aligned. And so by May of this year, we will put into force a $500 million parametric insurance policy for the 88 poorest countries in the world. So this will never happen again.
I'd like to just pause on that fact for a moment. That you know, in August of 2014, thanks to Jim, Ebola, which had already had a head start, and you know, did quite a lot of psychological damage and some real damage in parts of the world, was stopped, or the genie was put back in the bottle, and Larry Brilliant, who was running the Global Threats Fund at the time, and Mark
one of my
Smolinski,
heroes, by the way. Yeah.
Yes.
By the way, Atul talked about the science of delivery, but Larry was the one who I credit with starting the science of delivery. He wrote a book about smallpox eradication. That it was the very first book that showed us that management and systems is what's critical for public health. So Larry,
yes.
Thank you.
And Larry always said, you know, he took credit for putting out the Ebola crisis, and gave you props to. No, so Mark Smolinski, who works with Larry and runs the pandemics program of our group, you know, the goal has been to end pandemics. I like to say that epidemics happen, pandemics are optional. Yeah. And so what you've done is put in place something that can get us to a place where we may never see another pandemic.
Well, it's just one part of it, and we're still not ready, right? So this is one small part of it, but it's a pretty important part, meaning that we don't have to wait until countries decide to be generous, right? So just to, you know, we created a cash window, which can be released for any reason, and so that cash window should have released really in December of 2013 when the first cases, and we could have put it out then, but it would have definitely, even if that cash window hadn't put it out, it would have released at a point that the epidemic was 10 times smaller than what it was when the first money actually was released. So that, you know, it's there, but still, I mean, Larry knows more about this than I do, but you know, the system is not there yet. We don't have a system of making new vaccines. We don't have a surveillance system that works in all the countries of the world. So we're still far short of it, and it's just because, you know, what always happens is pandemics are panic, neglect, panic, neglect, panic. That's what happens every single time. And so what we're trying to do is to say, at least this, you know, the insurance instrument, when I first talked about it after the Ebola epidemic, we had 15 donors. Oh, of course, we're going to definitely do this, right? At the end, we only had 2. Only the Japanese and the Germans could remember that this was an issue at some point. Right. And this happens every single time. Every single time it happens. And so right now, the scary thing is we're in this lull. And at least we have the insurance instrument. There's more going on, but we're not ready. We're really not ready.
Well, I wanted to also, I know we only have a few minutes left, but you know, the World Bank, as I've learned, the more I've come to know you and understand you know, the organizations that make up the World Bank group and how it touches just about every place in the world. You know, beyond health, there are a number of initiatives that you care about. Wonder if you'd like to talk about that.
Yeah, you know, to try to tie together what you know, the great presentations by Winnie and Hamdi. You know, the book by Thomas Piketty, right? Capitalism in the 21st Century. Capitalism in the 21st Century is the nerdiest 600-page book you've ever read, right? And I actually, because of my job, I read the whole thing, but it turns out that if you look at Kindle, Thomas Piketty sold huge numbers of Capitalism in the 21st Century, but it has, they track how far you read in Kindle.
Right.
It has the tiniest proportion of actual readership, right?
Right.
But in it, he says that capital will always grow faster than wages, so we're doomed to increasing inequality. But on one page, page 21, he says, but if you can move capital from rich to poor, and you can improve the quality of education in poor countries, and you can link capital to knowledge, then you can actually see things growing in other places. And so right now, the most important thing that we're trying to do is play the role that I think both Winnie and Hamdi talked about, right? We have to be the honest broker that sits between the global market capitalist system and poor countries. And right now, there are huge win-win situations. Trillions of dollars sitting in negative interest rate bonds. So in other words, you pay Germany to keep your money for you, right? And so pension funds and insurance companies are desperate to get higher returns. And we know that there are potentially very solid returns in developing countries. But we cannot let what happened in the past, which is mass privatizations that were very bad for poor countries. So we're now trying to change everything we do to be the facilitator, to make sure that the capital, and we will attach knowledge to that capital, can move to developing countries to create these win-win situations. Because, if we don't, we're in a lot of trouble. I mean, I know we're out of time, but if I can go, look, one of the things we're seeing,
out of time, Jim.
one of the things we're seeing, and it's great to see, is that aspirations are converging in the world, right? And we have 3,000 PhDs at the World Bank, and you ask them a question, and they get at it in such an interesting way. And I just said, I see aspirations converging all over the world, and I'm really worried about it, because unless we move more quickly in fighting poverty, unless we move more quickly in creating jobs, thwarted aspirations could turn to something really negative. Right? And so they went back and they looked at all the research and they said, in fact, it is happening. And here's what it is. It's very cool that if your reference, the income to which you reference yourself goes up 10%, unless your own income goes up half that, you become very dissatisfied, right? But here's what's happening, that with access to the internet, people are now happy to get access to the internet, but are now much more likely to want to migrate and much more likely to see that their reference income is not just the people around them, but a global reference income, right? So aspirations linked to opportunity yield dynamism. Aspirations linked to frustration yield, conflict, violence, extremism, all the things that we don't, that we worry about. And so I just feel this huge sense of urgency to make the system work as Winnie would like to see it work, and to make the system work as Hamdi has made it work. Right. But there has to be a group of us that says, look, if Xi Jinping says, and he said recently, I'm the leader of the largest communist party in the world, and I want to tell you that global market capitalism is the ocean we all swim in, and any effort to turn it into lakes and rivers will fail, right? So just ask the leader of the largest communist party in the world how the system works. That is the system. And our role now is to make it work for everybody. Now, that's going to be very, very difficult, but it's, I think, you people here, the social entrepreneurs, who are going to make this work. Now, let me leave you with one final story. I was in Tanzania, and as I always do, I go to, I visit some social project, and this time I visited a school, and there were 11-year-olds, and they stood up, and I asked them, what do you want to be when you grow up? And 2 out of the 4 students who stood up said, I want to be president of the World Bank. Right? Now, and here's what I told them. I told them, in 1959, I was born in Korea. And Korea was one of the poorest countries in the world. It had a lower GDP per capita than Ghana or Somalia, and had about the same GDP per capita as Kenya. I went back and looked at the archive reports from the World Bank about Korea in 1959, 1960, 1961. And in it, they say Korea is essentially a hopeless country. They're way too Confucian. They have no industrial base, right? No industrial base. It's mostly an agricultural country. The rate of illiteracy was about 80%. And so they said that they wouldn't be able to pay back even the lowest interest rate loans, so they're ineligible for a loan from the World Bank. 1959, 60, 61. 62, they started considering Korea. 63, they got their first loan. And so I said, in 1963, I was a kindergarten student in Korea. And I doubt that if the World Bank president had visited Korea, that he would look in that classroom and think that a future World Bank president was sitting in that classroom. So don't ever let anyone tell you here in Tanzania that you can't be president of the World Bank Group. Now, you know, the task is much harder now. The convergence of aspiration means that very soon you're going to, and Jeff is always teaching me things, but internet access is going to be global very, very quickly. And so you're going to have 7.3 billion people in the world who all want a more or less middle-class lifestyle. And if we don't meet those aspirations, you're going to see some very ugly situations in the world. And so right now, what we're trying to do is to say, if the leader of the largest communist party in the world tells us that we've got to make global market capitalism work for everybody, we should probably listen to him. And we should probably try to be as creative as we can possibly be. See, pandemic insurance was using the tools that the rich use every day to make themselves richer on behalf of the poorest people in the world, right? And there's more, guarantees, swaps. There's so many tricks. And I felt embarrassed after a year at the World Bank. How could I have been around, talking crap like, close the World Bank, and have not learned about finance all these years? Because finance is what's going to make the world work and this system work for poor people. So what I would say is, all of you in this room, right? Learn how this stuff works. Exchange rate risk guarantees for Zimbabwe or Zambia could be the difference between ending poverty and not. You got to know what they are. You got to know how they work. You got to know how to demand that we put them in place for the poorest of the poor as well. I'm worried. The convergence of aspirations is great. Everyone should be able to have the experience that I, as a Korean American, have had. But in the path to getting there, if we don't find ways to make the system work for everybody, we're going to not leave a very nice world for our children.
Jim, I'm going to wrap up with a comment that one of the most amazing things about you, and I learn this every time we talk, is that you believe that everybody in the world has the potential to be a change maker, and that everybody in the world should have the opportunity to improve their lives. And that's something that's shared with all of the social entrepreneurs in this room, and you bring hope. And social entrepreneurs bring hope and inspiration. You are a social entrepreneur. You're also in the right person in the right place at the right time, and we hope you keep doing this as long as you can. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you. This is so cool. I'm going to walk you off. Well, as you can see, it's difficult to get stories from Jim Kim. I wish we had 2 hours to hear all the things that he's working on. But I'm going to shift gears for a minute. I've always been a fan of Don Henley's music. The first songs I learned on guitar when I was 13 were Eagles songs, Peaceful Easy Feeling, Take It Easy. And later when I had teenage angst about relationships, I did woeful versions of Desperado and Lion Eyes. Some unlucky folks in the audience here have had the opportunity to hear me play some of those songs at our after events at the Forum. But there's another side of Don that I'd like to tell you about tonight. Back in my eBay days in the early 2000s, I took a vacation out in the woods in California, and I hadn't taken a vacation in a long time. just as I arrived, I got a message that Don Henley had called, and he invited me to a private dinner and an Eagles concert that night. I was amazed. Don Henley was calling me. So I was torn between staying on vacation or going home. And as I was thinking about it, I saw, for the first time ever, an eagle flew by. I took that as a sign. So I drove home, and when I arrived up in the tree, there was another eagle. I had heard that Eagles was the name that the group came up with when they were first starting out, and they had a vision of this name while doing peyote in the desert. This is going to be fun tonight, I thought. Alas, there was no peyote at the dinner that night, but Don described to me another vision that he had for conservation of the environment. It turned out that Don was especially inspired by Henry Thoreau's book, Walden, from 1854, that reflected on the joy of living in harmony with nature when Thoreau lived in the Walden Woods. The book marked the beginning of the American environmental movement and inspired philosophical descendants such as John Muir, Walt Whitman, John Burroughs, Herbert Wendell Gleason, and Edwin Way Teale. Thoreau's other passion was social justice, and his famed essay, Civil Disobedience, influenced everyone from Gandhi to Tolstoy and Chekhov to Martin Luther King and Nelson Mandela. In 1989, Don heard that a property developer was going to plow over a historically significant portion of Walden Woods, and he was sad that the environmental movement might lose one of its primary symbols. So he set out to stop it by gradually buying the land bit by bit through benefit concerts, persistent efforts, and as it turned out, by having dinner after dinner with as many people as he could. And so Don Henley became a social entrepreneur, and our lives intersected. Over the years, Don has preserved much of Walden Woods and created the Thoreau Institute, and these efforts have become beacons for the conservation movement, educating hundreds of thousands of people a year. I was proud to help add a Silicon Valley element along with Sally, supporting Worldwide Walden so that people everywhere could experience Walden online. Most of you know Don Henley as a prolific artist, but I hope you'll leave tonight with an appreciation for his exceptional charitable work. I'd like to close by sharing some lyrics from Don's most recent solo album, Cass County, which came out in 2015. Came out of the gates at #1, leaping across generations to create yet another piece of timeless music. In his song, Praying for Rain, Don says, "I ain't no wise man, but I ain't no fool, and I believe that Mother Nature is taking us to school. Maybe we just took too much and put too little back. It isn't knowledge, it's humility we lack." Please enjoy this video, and then join me in welcoming Don Henley.
As co-founder of the legendary rock band Eagles and celebrated solo artist, Don Henley's artistic career spans 4 decades. Growing up in rural Texas, Mr. Henley was an avid reader of Thoreau and Emerson. In 1990, he founded the Walden Woods Project in response to the threat of commercial development on the Massachusetts land where Thoreau explored the essential truths about living in harmony with nature and kept a journal that became his seminal book, Walden.
In the early 1990s, developers had plans to build a large office complex and a condominium development on 2 of the most historic sites in Walden Woods. And we fought hard to protect it from the bulldozers. And we have been fighting ever since. Walden marks the very beginning of the conservation movement in the United States and served as an inspiration for what would later become the National Park System.
The Walden Woods Project helped to assure the preservation of this iconic landscape, which served as the inspiration for Thoreau's reflections on nature, self-reliance, and civil disobedience, and has played a central role in the global environmental movement. In 1993, Mr. Henley co-founded the nonprofit Caddo Lake Institute to help protect 27,000 acres of East Texas wetlands, where he spent much of his childhood. Don Henley's advocacy for the environment has earned him the National Humanities Medal. The Walden Woods Project and its educational programs continue to nurture environmental advocates and active stewards of our natural resources.
Please join me in welcoming Don Henley.
Thank you, everybody. Thanks for coming. Thank you. They told me to place this right here. So there it is. Thank you very much. Thank you, Jeff. I am deeply grateful for this recognition. I'm not going to sing for you this evening. I'm going to talk as best I can. I just finished a tour in Australia and New Zealand, so I don't have much of a voice left, but I will croak this out. I appreciate the opportunity to provide a brief overview of the Walden Woods Project's mission. And for those of you who are interested in learning more about our work, I would like to direct you to our website, which is simply walden.org. If you promise to go to our website, I promise to speak for less than 10 minutes. Located about 20 miles northwest of Boston, Massachusetts, Walden Woods inspired the writings of author and philosopher Henry David Thoreau. Walden Pond and the woods surrounding it are a cultural treasure and a National Historic Landmark. The problem is that about 95 years ago, back in the early days of the 20th century, when measures were being taken to protect Walden Pond and Walden Woods, over 1,000 acres of the woodland where Henry David Thoreau walked and thought and wrote were left unprotected, hence the founding of the Walden Woods Project. During the course of the past 27 years, the Walden Woods Project has been able to permanently protect a number of sites near Walden Pond that had been threatened with commercial development. But more historic land remains vulnerable, and our conservation work continues, along with our educational work. Our initiatives are built on the framework of Thoreau's fundamental ethics and tied to today's global challenges. I'd like to briefly summarize two key topics. Number one, why the context and application of Thoreau's principles are more important than ever before, and how Thoreau's writings encourage change in the way we think and act to protect the planet and to drive social progress. This year we commemorate the 200th anniversary of Thoreau's birth, and in doing so we celebrate one of only a handful of individuals credited with fostering two distinct yet related sets of moral imperatives. Many refer to Thoreau as the father of the conservation movement. He told us why we need to recognize the role of nature in our lives. He said, "In wildness is the preservation of the world." And he told us that every town should have a park, a common possession for instruction and recreation. He realized 200 years ago that our physical and spiritual health is vested in the health of the natural world and our connection to it, not our domination of it. He was one of the first people to assert that his literary masterpiece, Walden, is not a book about life in the woods. It is a book about life in the world. It's a story of everyone, everywhere, transcending the present moment and representing the promise and the prospect of every person through the ages. Thoreau's second moral imperative involves the individual's obligation to resist evil in all its forms. The views he expressed in his essay, Civil Disobedience, were a precursor to today's passive resistance movement. Thoreau said, "What is the value of any political freedom but as a means to a moral freedom?" He posed the question, could a greater miracle take place than for us to look through each other's eyes for an instant? So as we consider the current political landscape in America and beyond, Thoreau's words continue to ring true. Civil disobedience, based on the citizens' responsibility to oppose slavery, would become a very influential work for some of the world's greatest leaders and thinkers, including Gandhi, Tolstoy, and Martin Luther King Jr. Recently, an independent writer and climate activist named Wynne Stevenson authored a thought-provoking article entitled, "Why Thoreau Matters Now." He wrote, "There is no greater threat to human freedom today than climate change." If slavery was the human moral crisis of Thoreau's time, then global warming and its impact on countless innocent lives is the human and moral crisis of our own time. As Thoreau knew, in the face of such facts, the thing to do is not to retreat, but to engage. Thoreau was a keen observer of the natural world. And today, his prolific journal entries about the plant and animal life in Walden Woods are offering scientists valuable data on the impacts of climate change in New England. In fact, there's a book about it called Walden Warming. Thoreau's writings provide insights into some of the most urgent issues of our time. And these include understanding and protecting the biological diversity of life, living on a planet of limited resources, and the role of personal responsibility in today's world. At the Walden Woods Project, our educational initiatives employ Thoreau's ideas in understanding and confronting these challenges. Over 500,000 people visit Walden each year, and 1 in 4 of them lives outside the United States. This presents a great opportunity to introduce Thoreau's ideas on a broader global scale to a broader global audience. We have a new interactive experience at the Walden Woods Project. It's called Where's Your Walden? I know. Anyway, this new interactive experience will invite Walden Pond visitors to identify and share their own Waldens, places of special significance, natural beauty and inspiration, or ecological significance. And this approach embodies a very simple idea that was inspired by Thoreau, that places like Walden Pond are essential and universal. Thoreau saw himself as an everyman, and he made Walden his everywhere. And this idea reinforces the reality that we all share this planet and everything is interconnected. As Thoreau's great disciple John Muir said, when we try to pick out anything by itself, we find it hitched to everything else in the universe. So we can't protect our Waldens without preserving the global environment, because it's all connected. The Walden Woods Project's educational initiatives encourage youth to reflect on their environmental ethic through Thoreau's lens of personal introspection, examining what the natural world means to them and how they can work to protect it. And as a result, they develop a moral compass that will help them navigate many different issues for their lives. Our organization maintains the most comprehensive Thoreau library in the world, affording scholars access to a wealth of research materials. Recently, a determined and courageous man from Iran used our library's resources to translate Walden into Farsi for the very first time in history. This extraordinary man said, "I do not look at myself as a mere translator of Walden. The peoples of the world need those voices who know where a bridge of understanding should be built. He said, we cannot be friends, we cannot begin to love one another if we do not first try to understand each other. Henry David Thoreau, like so many people who are far ahead of their time, was roundly criticized in his own time and in his own place. He was labeled a crank, an idler, an eccentric, a weirdo. But his words continued to reverberate and to touch people around the globe. So in closing, I wish to say that I'm truly honored to be here today among all of you who are working so tirelessly and successfully to advance values-based solutions to global challenges. Thank you.
What do you hope that people who are watching you now take from this experience?
Well, it's like they will take the experience of, overcoming obstacles.
Overcoming obstacles. Yeah. Because everybody in here, in this band, has been through terrible times.
Yes.
Yes. We take strength from your strength.
So I'm trying to sing about the war in Freetown, the rebel war in our country. So let me do the rapper. I go try me can remember that time back now October. Pretty that me bad friend be don't pass by me in my country. So I go make up my mind where I go make myself for medicine. So I not can remember. You know, sometimes I would like to rap like Busta Rhymes.
Busta Rhymes.
Yeah. I would like to rap like Busta Rhymes. I go try me can remember that time back now October. Pretty that me bad friend be don't pass by me in my country. So I go make up.
Yeah, yeah, oh yeah. I welcome conflict for the sake of power. Will you sing it again? I welcome conflict for the sake of power. Again and again. The Sierra Leonean people needed a revolution, but not a bloody revolution. Not a negative revolution. We needed a positive revolution.
The 4th of June, 1997, we are registered as refugees. I was thinking it was just for 1 year or 6 months. I never knew that I would take a very long time in Guinea. I never knew.
Living like a refugee, it's not easy. You see, I just took all the problems, the suffering of the people, and then make a song of it. Live like a refugee.
You left your country to seek refuge in another man's land. You left your country to seek refuge in another man's land. You will be confronted by strange dialects. You will be fed with unusual diets. You got to sleep in a tarpaulin house, which is so hot. You got to sleep on a tarpaulin mat, which is so cold. Oh, we on time, living like a refugee. And now it's not easy.
The refugee all-stars band started with only 2 people. I'm the singer and Fago plays the guitar. This I will play Simakoya Kama. We are singing the ghettos together. But we had a dream that we one day get a group.
Ajua left me go back to Ghana. She don't notice me anything.
The band is just improving. Improving in the sense of making more music and trying to exhibit more of our tradition. As we can see, the world is faced with a lot of crises. There are many displaced people who need a helping hand. And we come from that same situation. And then we have many hands that help us get out of that situation. And so we just feel it is our own responsibility also to raise this awareness and give a helping hand to people who find themselves into the same situation.
People who have problems, people who are frustrated will be revived if they hear the greatness of a refugee all-stars band. You say, yes, me refugee, I'm a refugee, and I know that refugees can excel.
Good evening, everybody. The world is getting tougher. But, love is what we share. Love is the answer. Give me cold water, now for give me cold water. Give me cold water, give me cold water, give me lily cold water. Ah, cold water. Give me lily cold water. Give me cold water. Give me lily cold water. Ah, cold water. Give me lily cold water. Give me cold water. Emanibo badiba. Agenda. Emanibo badiba. Imanibo badibo, agenda. Imanibo badibo, agenda. For prosperity, will not get enough light. Agenda. For prosperity, will not get enough rose. Agenda. For prosperity, Pompatanodi. Agenda. For prosperity, will keep place no do. Agenda. Papa government, well body now we problem. Papa government, chop money now we problem. Papa government, house rent now we problem. Papa government, working place now we problem. Papa government, yeah. Wake up. Papa government, yeah. Wake up. Give me lily kolowata. Ah, kolowata. Give me lily kolowata. Give me kolowata. Give me lily kolowata. Emanibo badiba, agenda. Emanibo badiba, agenda for change. Imanibo Balibo.
Agenda for change.
Imanibo Balibo.
Agenda.
Imanibo Balibo. Agenda for change. Our full agenda. We want the world to change. And the changes we want is just peace. Everywhere in the world. Hold it. You know what? We have a problem in the world today, the refugee issue. We feel very connected with them because we really came from that situation. And we just want to tell everybody and appeal. A refugee needs you. Please give a helping hand.
We are living like a refugee.
Anna,
it's not easy.
Really not easy.
Living like a refugee.
Young man, you know.
It's not easy.
We are
living like a refugee. It's not easy.
Now you listen. You left your country to seek refuge in another man's land. You left your country to seek refuge in another man's land. You will be confronted by strange dialects. You will be fed with unusual diets. You gotta sleep in a tarpaulin house, which is so hard. You gotta sleep on a tarpaulin mat, which is so cold. Oh, we old time,
living like a refugee.
Anna,
it's not easy.
Really not easy.
Living like a refugee.
Young man, you know.
It's not easy.
Oh, we old time.
Living like a refugee.
Anna,
it's not easy.
How it difficult to sit under the sun patiently waiting for your supply. How it difficult to stand under the rain patiently waiting for your supply. The overcrowding sometimes lead to the outbreak of a cholera. It's your bulgur, it's your cut.
It's not easy.
Get your safety, get your legality.
It's not easy.
Get your papers, get your license.
It's not easy.
Get your salary, get your job.
It's not easy.
Really not easy.
Living like a refugee.
Anna,
it's not easy.
We are
living like a refugee. It's not easy.
Put it down for me. Put it down for me. I love you. I love you.
Tonight.
I love you. I love London.
Tonight.
I love you. I love you. Yes.
Tonight.
I love you. I love England.
Tonight.
Wake it up. Because we live in. We live in.
We live in.
We live in. We live in.
We live in. We live in. We live in.
Sing. because we live it. We live it. We live it. We live it. Rwanda, Liberia, Sierra Leone. We live it. Congo, Kinshasa. We live it. We live it. We live it. I say we live it. We live it. We live it. Really not easy.
Living like a refugee is not easy.
Sing. Warm it up, warm it up, warm it up, warm it up. Pop, 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 pop. Someone also. Warm up. Shut. So, are you feeling? Are you feeling? I hear me people them, oh Sierra Leonean say, me family there, oh me people them, I shall be say, Congos are not good, bad are not good, which not good. I hear me people them, oh Sierra Leonean say, me family there, oh me people them, I shall be say, Congos are not good, bad are not good, which not good. We not good to we self. To we self. We not good to we self. You meet me any woman, you want for make we part. You meet me everybody, you want for make we scatter. You will not be there, now you want bring separation. And you will not concern, now you want barricades. But waiting God on man, you not go able to well. Waiting God on gather, you not go able to scatter. Mama, yeah, no time, not till you make it life. Mama, yeah, no time, not till you make it life. Not till you yarn up for me, not till you choose out for me. Mama, yeah, no time, not till you make it life. Not till you love up for me, not till you pick up for me. Mama, yeah, no time, not till you make it life. Sure. Thank you, thank you.
The Sierra Leone Refugee All-Stars. I think I just saw the president of the World Bank dancing in the front row. only at Skoll, ladies and gentlemen. Amazing music, amazing afternoon. I hope you feel energized and warmed up for the hard work of dinner. Your badge will tell you where you're having dinner, and the amazing stewards in orange will point you in the right direction. And those dinners aren't just for refueling. They're about serendipity and looking after yourselves and each other. And of course, for creating common ground. You have the Skoll World Forum in common, and I look forward to hearing the ideas that emerge. The poet W.H. Auden joked that having a vice in common made for great friendships, but that having virtue in common didn't. Friends, please prove Auden wrong. Passionately smash every expectation. Every act is an act of creation. It's not a moment, it's a movement. If you've got tickets, you know where that's from. Who had tickets? Anyone know where that's from? That's very good. Have a wonderful week. See you on Friday. We've overrun a little bit, and I'm glad that we did, since I wouldn't want to edit a minute of this. But what it does mean is that getting from here to your refueling, you should try to do as promptly as you can so we don't keep the servers waiting. Have a wonderful week. See you on Friday.